I'm going to need you to step aside. Backpack, now! She didn't argue, didn't flinch, just handed it over, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. At first they found nothing, a notebook, a charger, a photo, but then a hidden pocket, a sealed case. Inside it, a bronze medal so strange, so classified, 2 federal agents stepped back like they'd touched a Cold War ghost. No records, no serial, just a warning. Unauthorized duplication is a felony. Record ID redacted. They thought they were searching for contraband. Instead, they found a relic that could wake up something buried for 40 years and a girl carrying the key. If this mystery grips you, subscribe to Veteran Biker now. Where are you tuning in from? Let us know below. The words, a hushed whisper from a seasoned security agent, cut through the sterile hum of Federal Delta Airport. They had just emptied her backpack, then they froze. Revealed on the inspection table was a medal, ancient and dark, its symbols an enigma, its very presence defying every known record. Who was this girl, so utterly calm amidst the shock, holding a piece of a forgotten war? What silent power did it hold? And what buried truth was about to surface, shattering decades of meticulously hidden secrets? Join us on Veteran Biker as we plunge into a story where the past refuses to stay buried. Tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. In the early morning light of Federal Delta Airport, a familiar rhythm of hurried footsteps and rolling luggage set the scene. Yet, amidst the predictable flow, a singular figure stood apart. Taylor Vance, barely 17, was an anomaly. She carried no oversized headphones, no smartphone, no rolling suitcase. Her sole possession was a worn olive-drab backpack, slung over one shoulder as if its weight belied its appearance. The canvas jacket she wore, too large for her slender frame, hinted at a life lived far from the polished terminals and weary travelers scrolling through their digital worlds. She wasn't doing anything wrong, and no one spoke aloud. But her presence was a stark contrast, a quiet ripple in a sea of predictable motion. Havoc Thorne, a security officer working Lane 3, noticed her before the backpack caught his full attention. At first glance, he considered her a military dependent, perhaps flying between bases. Yet, a quick scan of her boarding pass told a different story, a one-way ticket to Fountain City, no return, no guardian listed, no checked baggage. It was a detail that pricked at his trained intuition. His gaze lingered on her eyes next, calm, observant, unclouded by the usual anxieties of air travel. She didn't fumble for laptops or rush to remove her shoes like the others. Instead, she watched everything. The agents, the scanners, the people ahead of her. It was a gaze that suggested either a deep understanding of every possible scenario or a quiet anticipation for something specific to go wrong. She looked to Havoc, not dangerous, but profoundly prepared. He flagged her bag for manual inspection. It was an automatic decision, born not from suspicion of malice, but from the unsettling sense of meticulous readiness that radiated from her. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to check your backpack manually," he stated. Taylor didn't flinch, didn't roll her eyes with teenage disdain. She simply offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, unshouldered the worn backpack and handed it over. It was heavier than it looked. Havoc carried the bag to the secondary table, signaling for Officer Marcus Thorne to assist. The standard procedure began: zippers, pockets, compartments. Nothing seemed immediately out of place. A paperback novel, its spine cracked and worn. A blue spiral notebook filled with neat, precise handwriting and intricate sketches that hinted at a mind beyond her years. A phone charger, but notably no phone. A toothbrush and travel-sized toothpaste. And a faded photograph. A man in a military uniform. A young girl on his shoulders, likely Taylor, years younger. A flannel hoodie, folded tightly into a Ziploc bag, seemed to be the last ordinary item, all typical, predictable contents for a teenage traveler. Then Havoc felt the weight at the very bottom. Something hard, cold, unyielding. It was nestled deep within the back liner, a pocket most travelers never even knew existed. He unzipped it and found a small leather case, rectangular and black with subtle brass trim, roughly the size and shape of an eyeglasses box. There were no markings on its exterior, no identifying labels. He glanced at Taylor. She stood just 10 feet away, hands clasped in front of her, completely still. There was no panic, no protest, just a silent, unwavering watchfulness. He opened the case slowly, carefully. Inside, nestled in a velvet lining, was the medal. It was unlike anything Havoc Thorne had ever encountered in his extensive military or CIA career. The metal itself was a deep, dark bronze, aged around the edges as if it had seen centuries, not just decades. The centerpiece was a bald eagle, wings spread wide, gripping twin lightning bolts in its talons. Above the eagle, 3 words were engraved in Latin, an ancient, forgotten tongue. Below the phrase, clear and precise, Department of Strategic Operations, Class Xylon. The lettering wasn't decorative, it was government-issued, the kind of stark, unembellished typography found only on certain military awards, if one knew precisely where to look. But this wasn't in any official registry Havoc knew. He would have remembered. More disturbing still was the reverse side of the medal. There, in tiny all-capital letters, etched with surgical precision, was a chilling warning. Authorized possession only. Unrecorded duplication. I.S. a felony. Record ID redacted. Havoc had encountered fake medals before. It happened often enough. But this was no novelty trinket or cheap imitation found on a forgotten corner of the internet. This was solid, real, and, most crucially, classified. Marcus Thorne leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "That's not in the system, is it?" Havoc's voice was low, almost a murmur. "No, Marcus, that's not in any system." He took a step back, both men staring at the impossible object. The airport's usual cacophony seemed to dull around them, becoming a distant, muted drone. Travelers continued their ceaseless shuffle, dragging luggage, sipping overpriced coffee, utterly unaware that something profound, something that defied the known world, had just surfaced in their midst. Havoc gently closed the case and placed it on the table. He looked back at the girl, still watching, still unmoved. "Taylor Vance?" He read from her ID. "I'm going to need to ask you a few more questions." She nodded again. No protest, no hint of a sigh. "What is this?" he asked, tapping the case. "It was my grandfather's," she said simply, her voice soft but direct, devoid of any teenage defiance. "And what was he?" Havoc pressed, his gaze fixed on her. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, a pause so brief it might have been imagined. Radio technician, army, retired. Havoc looked back at the medal, then at her. That was not a technician's medal, that was something else, something far above his pay grade. He tapped into the terminal quietly, sending an alert to his supervisor. A level 2 alert was issued, a quiet one. No blaring alarms, no blaring sirens, just a silent call up the chain of command, rippling through the hidden channels of federal security. Within 10 minutes, an agent from the Department of National Security was en route to the airport. Taylor Vance, the quiet girl with the worn backpack, was escorted to a private security room. The room was stark, with neutral walls and a coffee table bolted to the floor. She didn't cry, she didn't ask for a lawyer, she just sat and waited. The case, containing the medal, sat untouched in the middle of the table. Later, Havoc would replay the moment over and over, the feel of the cold metal, the chill that ran down his spine when he saw the twin lightning bolts, the uncanny calm in her eyes. the impossible artifact that now made him question everything he thought he knew about forgotten missions and dead programs. Metals like that, he knew, weren't made for show, they were made for silence. And someone, somewhere, had just broken it. The room was cold, a stark contrast to the bustling airport outside, yet Taylor didn't ask for a jacket. She sat at the metal table, still, her worn backpack placed neatly beside her feet like a trusted, silent companion. The black case containing the medal rested untouched in the center of the table, a silent challenge in the sterile space. Havoc Thorne stood off to the side, arms crossed, his gaze flickering between her composed face and the enigmatic case. The longer he remained in that room, the more certain he became that this was no longer a simple security check. This was something else entirely, something buried deep beyond the scope of his daily duties. At precisely 11:17 a.m., a woman entered the room. She wore a fitted black suit, tailored with military precision, and moved with an undeniable air of confidence. A Department of National Security badge hung from her lanyard. This was Agent Taylor Vance in her mid-40s, her posture betraying years of disciplined training. She was not there for pleasantries. Taylor Vance, she stated, her voice crisp and direct, as she took the seat opposite the girl. "Do you know why you're here?" Taylor nodded, her eyes steady. "Because of the medal." Lyra studied her, a flicker of surprise quickly masked, crossing her features. "You seem very calm." "I knew someone would notice it eventually," Taylor replied, her voice soft but direct, devoid of any trace of teenage defiance and, notably, any hint of fear. Lyra's gaze shifted to the black case. Her fingers tapped once, a sharp, almost imperceptible rhythm against the table. "Where did you get it?" "My grandfather gave it to me 2 days before he died," Taylor answered, her tone even. "Did he tell you what it was?" Lyra pressed, her eyes boring into Taylor's. "Not exactly," Taylor paused, a fleeting memory crossing her face. "Just that it was important, and that I had to bring it to someone." "Who?" Lyra's voice was sharper now, sensing a critical piece of the puzzle. "Serafina Kyle. Fountain City." The name hit Lyra with the force of an unexpected blow. Her face, usually a mask of control, hardened, and for a fraction of a second, her posture stiffened imperceptibly. It was the type of pause only trained observers like Havoc would catch. Taylor, too, noticed it. That name, she knew, meant something profound. Suddenly, the comms unit on Lyra's belt crackled with an urgent, distorted voice. "KL, danger, Omega target, abort!" The signal abruptly cut out, leaving behind a jarring silence. Lyra's hand instinctively flew to the unit, shutting it off, but the brief, garbled warning had already left its mark. A deep furrow appeared between her brows, and a wave of profound unease washed over her, an emotion she rarely displayed. The brief, frantic message confirmed her worst suspicions about the name Serafina Kyle. Lyra leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on Taylor, assessing, calculating. "You were flying there today?" "Yes, one way. I used the last of the savings account he left me," Taylor confirmed, her voice unwavering. Lyra's eyes dropped to the black case. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she opened it. The dark bronze eagle on the medal seemed to glare back at her, its spread wings and twin lightning bolts etched into its talons, forming a design she had never encountered, not on any known military honor. She turned it over, rereading the precise inscription on the back, authorized possession only. Unrecorded duplication is a felony, record ID redacted. But it was the term Department of Strategic Operations that truly stood out, a blaring red flag in her mind. This department, on paper, had ceased to exist since 1984. In her early years of training, whispers about it had circulated among agents after hours, stories exchanged in hushed tones over cheap coffee, Operation Scepter, Project Xylon, Black Signal. These tales always ended with a grim, knowing phrase, "They buried it all." Project Xylon was the one that consistently reappeared in theoretical case studies, an alleged Cold War-era covert psychological operations branch. Its rumored purpose was to manipulate international events through misinformation, psychological engineering, and disinformation. There were no official records, no survivors willing to speak openly, only persistent rumors that a small inner circle of operatives had received physical credentials, unique tokens proving their operational clearance. Those tokens, those medals, had never been officially confirmed until now. Lyra carefully closed the case and folded her hands, her expression unreadable. "Taylor, I need to ask again, are you absolutely sure your grandfather never told you where this came from?" Taylor blinked slowly, calmly. "He said he used to be someone else, someone important. He told me the medal was part of that, and he told me I had to deliver it." She paused, a shadow of her grandfather's enigmatic words lingering in the air. No explanations, just deliver it. "And what was your grandfather's name?" Lyra's voice was softer now, but laced with a new urgency. "Douglas Arthur Vance." Lyra froze, not visibly, but deep inside. Her stomach churned. She had seen that name before. It was listed in one of the heavily redacted Xylon training logs, rumored to have been accidentally decrypted during a 2006 data audit. He had been listed as a logistics and signals coordinator, level 4 clearance. His name had been scrubbed from all other systems. He had been real. And if Taylor was telling the truth, he had passed something on. Something the US government had spent decades pretending never existed. "Was your grandfather ever stationed overseas?" Lyra asked, her voice tight. "He was in Berlin in the early 80s, Taylor said. He never talked about it, just said the real war was never what you thought it was." Lyra stood abruptly. "Wait here." She stepped out of the room, closing the door firmly behind her. Havoc followed, a silent shadow. In the hallway, Lyra turned sharply to him, her eyes narrowed. "You didn't tell me," she accused. "Serafina Kael?" Havoc met her gaze. "You didn't ask." Lyra sighed, a sound of heavy resignation. "Kael has been presumed dead since 1991. She's one of 7 names tied to Project Xylon. She vanished off-grid, probably burned her identity. This girl, this kid, just name-dropped her like it was a coffee run." "So what now?" Havoc asked, the weight of the situation settling over him. Lyra's eyes met his, a grim determination hardening her features. "Now I go make a phone call I was told I'd never have to make. And then we pray whoever picks up knows what this means." A deep sense of apprehension washed over her, a tangible feeling of a vast, forgotten machinery stirring to life. She felt as though a solid, impenetrable wall of secrecy, one she had always believed in, was suddenly crumbling before her eyes. The simple act of a teenage girl handing over a backpack had shattered decades of official narratives and deeply embedded protocols. The implications were staggering, reaching far beyond the confines of airport security. This wasn't just a breach. It was an awakening. The very fabric of their hidden world, woven from classified operations and erased histories, was now being tugged by a thread held by a young girl. Back in the room, Taylor sat alone again. She looked at the black case still resting on the table. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She already knew what it meant, even if she didn't have the words to articulate its full scope. It meant that something buried had been dug up, something powerful, forgotten, and undeniably dangerous. Her grandfather's eyes in those final moments, weak but steady, had told her more than any explanation ever could. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a message. It was a key. And someone, somewhere, had just realized that a door, long sealed and presumed non-existent, had just opened. The secure interview room had no windows. Time passed differently in places like that, slow, muffled, uncertain. Taylor didn't check the clock. She knew how this would go. questions, suspicion. Eventually, someone from high up would come down with an answer no one wanted to hear out loud. The door opened again. This time, Agent Taylor Vance re-entered, flanked by another man. Special Operations Liaison Colonel Cassian Hale. He was in his mid-50s, with a square jaw, closely cropped hair, and a presence that seemed to fill the room, commanding immediate attention without a single word. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself. He walked in like he already knew everything he needed to know. "Miss Vance," he said, taking the seat across from her, folding his hands on the table. "May I see the medal?" Taylor glanced at the black case on the table, then nodded, a small, subtle gesture. Hale opened it like he was performing a ritual, his movements precise and deliberate. When his eyes fell on the medal, the transformation was immediate. His breath caught, a barely audible intake of air. His face, trained to reveal nothing, didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered, like someone watching a ghost walk in through the front door. A lifetime of classified knowledge, suppressed memories, and buried truths seemed to flood his gaze in that single instant. He looked at the medal not as a mere object, but as a living testament to a past he believed was permanently interred. The weight of its impossible existence hung palpably in the air, connecting him directly to a hidden chapter of history he had personally helped to seal away. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low and flat, devoid of any discernible emotion, yet resonating with an unspoken gravity. "I've told her," Taylor replied, her voice unwavering. "My grandfather gave it to me. He told me to find Serafina Kael." Hale stared at the medal a moment longer, then closed the case gently, almost reverently. "Do you know what this is?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and looked up at the ceiling, as if calculating how much he was allowed to say, how many years of top-secret protocol he was about to breach. "There are things in this government," he began, his voice taking on a deeper, more serious tone, "that have no budget line, no records, no chain of command in the traditional sense. Things created for the kind of operations the public can't know about." "Like Xylon," Taylor said quietly, her voice barely a whisper, yet it echoed with the weight of revelation. Hale froze. That word, Xylon, held an immense weight, like an ancient weapon unwrapped in daylight. It was a word that few knew, and fewer still dared to utter aloud. His eyes, now sharp and direct, bored into hers. "Where did you hear that word?" "My grandfather said it when he handed me the medal," Taylor replied, meeting his gaze evenly. "He said, 'It's from Xylon, they'll understand what it means.'" She paused, then added, "He didn't explain more." Hale sat forward, his hands clasped on the table, his expression grave. "Miss Vance, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room." Taylor said nothing, her silence a testament to her unwavering composure. Xylon was a covert psychological operations directive born during the Cold War, he continued, his voice steady, measured. Its purpose was to influence, disrupt, and when necessary, reconstruct the psychological stability of foreign leadership. We didn't assassinate, we rewired belief systems. Entire governments were destabilized through fear, rumors, illusions. Hale's gaze became distant, lost in the memories of a hidden conflict. Xylon's reach extended into media, economics, even religion, and it was highly compartmentalized. He tapped the case. Only 7 operatives were ever awarded that medal. It was more than a badge. It was a key, a token to activate dormant protocols. Most of us thought all 7 medals were destroyed after decommissioning. No copies, no public record, and yet here you are. Taylor's face remained still. She had questions, hundreds of them, swirling in her mind, but none of them would change what she had already instinctively accepted. Her grandfather wasn't just a quiet, lonely man fixing radios in his barn. He was part of something no one ever dared explain, something that now, impossibly, had found its way to her. The realization settled over her, a heavy mantle of destiny. "Then why give it to me?" Taylor asked, her voice quiet, cutting through the heavy silence that followed Colonel Hale's revelation. Hale leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze intense. "Because it wasn't about you. It was about who you could find." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Kyle." Agent Taylor Vance stepped closer, her expression grim. "That name, that's what scares us." Taylor blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Why?" "Serafina Kyle was the architect of the psychological triggers used by Xylon," Lyra explained, her voice low and grave. "She built mental frameworks that could shift ideologies over generations. Her work was classified above top secret. She vanished in 1991. No body, no trace. There were rumors she went rogue. Others say she disappeared to protect Xylon's final protocol. No one could prove either." Lyra's eyes met Taylor's, holding her gaze. "If your grandfather sent you to her, it means two things. One, she's still alive. And two—" Lyra hesitated, the weight of the second implication almost too heavy to voice. "She's waiting for this," Hale finished, his voice a quiet, chilling affirmation. The silence in the room stretched thick and suffocating, the weight of a forgotten legacy, of decades of buried secrets, pressed down on everyone present. It was a silent acknowledgement that their world, meticulously constructed on layers of classified information and carefully maintained ignorance, was about to be profoundly disrupted. Finally, Taylor spoke, her voice still calm, but with a new edge of resignation and resolve. "So what happens now?" Lyra turned to Hale, who gave a curt nod. "His decision was made. We're going to find her," Lyra said, her voice firm. "But we're going to do it on our terms." Quietly, undetected. The stakes were too high for any misstep, any public exposure of Xylon's existence. They needed discretion, precision, and absolute control. The implications of Kyle's survival and her potential connection to a reactivated Xylon were too immense to risk. A few minutes later, Taylor was escorted to a secure conference room. This space felt different from the sterile interview room. Less clinical, more operational. Satellite images, sharp and detailed, glowed on one wall, depicting remote, unpopulated landscapes. A tech agent sat hunched over a keyboard, his fingers flying across the keys, running a complex algorithm through decades of public records, classified documents, and behavioral profiles. The air hummed with the quiet intensity of high-level intelligence work. Lyra approached the tech agent, her voice low. "Input the name. Catherine Mendes." She paused, then corrected herself, catching the slip of the original name. "No, sorry. Serafina Kyle." The agent nodded, typing the name into the search field. On the screen, a grid of false identities began to appear. Female listings, all born around 1950, likely aliases. Passport fraud flags, property transfers, some names never used twice, appearing and disappearing like smoke. It was a digital ghost hunt, sifting through layers of intentionally obscured data. The room was filled with the soft click of the keyboard and the low hum of the servers as the algorithm worked its way through mountains of information, searching for the faintest digital echo of a woman who had meticulously erased herself from the world. Then, one match lit up green. Helen Courts, living in Cascade, Colorado, just outside Fountain City. The details scrolled across the screen. A small cabin, no cell service, no digital footprint whatsoever. Local records showed a woman in her 70s who paid cash for everything, her existence a deliberate blank slate in the digital age. Her mail was routed through a PO. box registered to a veterans foundation, one linked to a defunct military charity operated by former Xylon-affiliated personnel. The pieces clicked into place with chilling precision. "She's there," Hale said, his voice quiet but laced with triumph. "She's been waiting." Lyra looked at Taylor, her expression unreadable. "We're sending a team. You'll go with them." "I don't want protection," Taylor stated, her voice firm. "I want answers." Hale stepped forward, his gaze direct. "You may get both, or neither." His words carried the weight of experience, the grim reality of a world where truths were often fragmented and dangerous. They flew out the next morning. Taylor was given a new set of clothes, a temporary ID, and a non-disclosure agreement thick enough to block sunlight. But she didn't care about papers or protocols or the layers of bureaucracy that now surrounded her. She held the black case in her lap the entire flight, her fingers tracing the smooth, aged leather like it was a memory she hadn't lived yet. In her mind, she could still hear her grandfather's voice, a soft echo from the quiet cabin. "If you're holding this, it means I've done my part. Now it's your turn." She looked out the window as the plane descended over the Colorado mountains. Somewhere below, a woman the world thought dead was waiting, and the medal, cold and silent, was about to speak again. The sun, a brilliant orb in the morning sky, cast long, sharp shadows across the rugged landscape, illuminating a path into the unknown. The snow had come early that year in West Virginia. It fell in heavy silence over the wooded hills outside Harper's Ferry, blanketing the cabin where Taylor Vance had grown up. Inside, the old wood stove crackled softly, casting flickering light against the log walls and the photographs that lined the mantel. In the small back bedroom, Darian Vance lay in his bed, thinner than he had ever been, his once steady hands now trembling with age and illness. The man who had raised Taylor since she was 5 had shrunk into a shadow of himself, but his eyes remained sharp, alive, and full of something unspoken. He was a man holding secrets, his gaze a window to a past that weighed heavily upon him. Taylor sat beside him on a folding chair that creaked every time she leaned forward. She had been with him every day since the stroke, cooking meals he couldn't eat, reading books he no longer followed, holding his hand through the quiet parts of the night. They didn't talk about the end, but it hung between them like a dense fog, a shared unspoken truth. On this morning, however, something was different. "Taylor," he rasped, barely above a whisper. She moved closer, brushing a few stray snowflakes from her jacket sleeve. "I'm here, Grandpa." He turned his head slightly, his faded green eyes locking onto hers. "You remember the shed?" "Of course," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "I hated that place. Smelled like metal and mice." The memory of the cramped, dusty space filled with his strange radio equipment was vivid in her mind. He almost smiled, a faint, fleeting movement of his lips. "There's a toolbox hidden under the floorboards, behind the shortwave radio." She frowned, confusion clouding her expression. "Why?" His hand shifted under the blanket, reaching weakly, a gesture of quiet urgency. "You need to go get it now." Taylor hesitated. "It's early, Grandpa. Can't it wait until—" "No," he said, more forcefully than she'd heard in weeks, the word imbued with a sudden, surprising strength. "Now, Taylor, please." She stood, pulled on her coat, and grabbed the flashlight. The wind outside had picked up, howling through the trees like a warning, a mournful song carrying secrets through the crisp morning air. She made her way across the yard, boots crunching through fresh snow, and pushed open the warped door of the shed. The cold bit at her fingers as she brushed dust off the shortwave radio her grandfather had obsessed over for years, its dials and knobs hinting at distant, unseen connections. She pulled it aside, revealing a loose plank beneath. When she pried it up, a small black case waited beneath a folded cloth. She opened it, and the medal sat inside, exactly as it would later appear to the TSA agent at Federal Delta Airport. Even now, in the dim flashlight beam, it looked ancient, sacred, like it had been forged in a forgotten chapter of history, whispered into existence from the shadows of a hidden war. Her breath caught. The weight of it felt suddenly immense, an unexpected burden in her hands. She closed the case and returned to the house, tracking snow and silence behind her. Darian was still awake, his eyes fixed on the doorway. When he saw the case in her hand, he let out a breath that sounded like relief and sorrow all at once. "I thought maybe I'd take it to the grave," he murmured, his voice fading. "What is it?" Taylor asked, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes fixed on the mysterious object in her hand. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he motioned for her to sit beside him. "When I was young," he began, his voice thin but clear, "I believed in America the way children believe in superheroes. And then I was chosen, handpicked for something so classified it didn't even have a name at first, just a code name, Xylon." Taylor said nothing, watching the weight of his words settle into his face, marking the lines of age and unspoken burden. "We didn't fight with guns," he continued, his gaze distant, lost in the shadows of memory. "We fought with ideas, with information, or the absence of it. Our tools were stories, illusions, whispers. We planted thoughts like seeds and watched governments rot from within. There were 7 of us, each entrusted with a fragment of control. The medals were our verification." He paused, a fit of coughing shaking his frail body, his hands trembling against the blanket. "I left when I couldn't carry the weight anymore. They told me the program had ended. They said we'd succeeded. But I knew better. Kyle vanished. The others scattered. I thought it would all stay buried. But then I started hearing things, seeing patterns again, and I knew someone had activated the shadows." He looked at her then, his eyes fierce, imbued with a final desperate urgency. "And that's why I'm giving it to you." Taylor's voice cracked thick with unshed tears. "Why me?" "Because you don't ask too many questions, but you don't ignore the answers when they come," he whispered, his voice fading. "And because you've seen what the world really is, you've lived with pain, and you never let it make you cruel. That's rare, Taylor. That's why." She held the case tightly, suddenly aware of its weight in a new, profound way. It was not merely an object. It was a legacy, a burden, a key to a world she never knew existed. "Go to Fountain City," he said, his voice barely audible now. "Find Serafina Kyle. She'll know what to do. Don't tell anyone else. Don't trust phones. Don't trust systems. If you're holding this after I'm gone, it means the last truth I have left is now yours." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. "I don't want this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know," he whispered back, a faint sad smile touching his lips. "That's why you're the right one." He closed his eyes, the exertion clearly exhausting him. Taylor sat there for another hour, holding the medal in her lap, unable to move, unable to comprehend the full scope of what had just transpired. By morning he was gone. She buried him herself, next to her grandmother's faded gravestone, on a hill they used to hike together. There was no service, no obituary, just the biting wind and the silent memory of a man who had held the darkest parts of history inside him like coals, never letting them go cold, but never letting them burn through the world again. And 2 days later, Taylor boarded a bus, then a train, then a flight, one way to Fountain City, just like he told her, just like the story demanded. The van slowed to a crawl as it wound its way through the narrow, snow-dusted back roads of Cascade, Colorado. Towering evergreens, heavy with fresh powder, lined the route, casting long, deep shadows across the windshield, making the morning light feel muted, almost hesitant. The GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago. the digital world falling silent as the physical world closed in around them, the forest swallowing the road like it was claiming back its own. The silence inside the van was palpable, broken only by the soft hum of the heater and the occasional crunch of tires on snow. "She's up here?" Taylor asked, her voice barely louder than the heater's quiet thrum, her gaze fixed on the deepening woods. The vastness of the wilderness felt like a living entity, an ancient sentinel guarding secrets. Agent Taylor Vance sat behind the wheel, her focus absolute, but a subtle tension in her jaw betrayed the high stakes. "If the profile's right, yes." Her voice was tight, measured. "This woman has avoided detection for 30 years. Either she's a ghost or she's smarter than everyone still breathing." The weight of that statement hung in the air, a testament to the elusive nature of their target. Lyra's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, her eyes scanning the tree line as if expecting a hidden trap at any moment. The air in the van was thick with anticipation, the quiet hum of the engine a counterpoint to the racing thoughts of its occupants. In the back seat, Colonel Cassian Hale remained silent, his imposing figure a study in controlled intensity. He was flipping through an old, worn file, its edges frayed from countless openings and closings. The photo stapled to the first page showed Serafina Kyle circa 1986. Dark hair tied tightly back, a severe expression, no smile, and eyes that could cut through lies like a sharpened blade. She looked precisely as formidable as her legend suggested. She had been a psychological warfare specialist, a phantom architect credited with developing the infamous Whisper Grid protocol, a terrifyingly effective network of misinformation cells that could destabilize entire regimes without a single bullet ever being fired. Then, in 1991, she had vanished. No trace, no digital footprint, no DNA evidence. Just a classified report, sealed with the chilling words "presumed deceased." Field abandonment protocol activated. The official narrative had closed her chapter, until Taylor Vance, a teenage girl from West Virginia, had uttered her name. The van came to a slow, deliberate stop at a small clearing. A weathered A-frame cabin stood near the tree line, half buried in snow, its rustic charm belying its hidden significance. Smoke rose lazily from its chimney, slow and steady, a wisp of domesticity in the otherwise wild landscape. There were no cameras, no fences, no obvious security measures, only a small satellite dish, oddly aimed at nothing in particular, and a wind chime crafted from flattened bullet casings, clinking softly in the gentle breeze. The scene was deceptively tranquil, hinting at a life of quiet, self-imposed exile. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice dropping to a low, cautious tone as she slipped on a pair of leather gloves. She turned to Taylor, her gaze serious. "Stay close, don't speak unless spoken to, and don't reach for anything." The unspoken command was clear. This was a mission, and Taylor was a vital yet untrained component. Taylor stepped out of the van, the cold air cutting sharply into her lungs. The metal case was tucked tightly under her arm, pressed against her side like a secret, its presence a constant, reassuring weight. Her boots crunched softly through the fresh snow as she followed Lyra and Hale toward the cabin's porch. Every step felt deliberate, leading her deeper into the heart of a mystery that spanned decades. The air thrummed with a strange energy, a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Before they reached the door, it opened. A woman stepped into view, elderly, thin, wrapped in layers of worn denim and wool, her silver hair tied in a low braid that nearly touched her waist. Her face was sharp and hollow, etched with the wisdom of years, but her eyes, those eyes were piercingly alert, like an old owl who had seen everything once and didn't care to see it again. They swept over Lyra and Hale with an almost dismissive glance, then settled on Taylor. Her gaze lingered on Taylor's face, then on the medal case tucked under her arm. "You brought it," Serafina Kyle said, her voice raspy, ancient, yet carrying an undeniable authority that brooked no argument. Taylor nodded, a silent affirmation of her unspoken mission. Serafina Kyle turned her piercing gaze to Lyra and Hale, her expression hardening. "You two don't belong here." "She does. You don't." Her words were not a question, but a cold, irrefutable statement of fact. Lyra started to respond, but Hale raised a hand, silencing her. He understood. "We're just here to make sure it gets to the right hands," he stated, his tone respectful, acknowledging the invisible line that had just been drawn. Kyle smirked, a fleeting, bitter twist of her lips. "Too late for that, it already has." She stepped aside, her hand gesturing inward. Only Taylor was allowed to enter. Lyra and Hale watched, their faces grim, as the cabin door closed, sealing Taylor inside with a woman who was a ghost, a legend, and possibly the last living link to a buried world. Inside the cabin, everything felt untouched by time. Bookshelves sagged under the immense weight of old leather-bound files, brittle paper maps covered in faded ink, and ink-stained journals, their pages filled with a lifetime of thoughts and secrets. A fire burned brightly in the stone hearth, casting dancing, flickering light against the rustic log walls, filling the air with the comforting scent of wood smoke. An ancient shortwave radio sat humming softly on a corner desk, its glowing dials a testament to forgotten frequencies. Next to it, a corkboard was filled with intricate strings connecting faded photographs, cryptic codes in neat red ink, and what looked like complex flowcharts, a visible map of a brilliant, terrifying mind. "Put it there," Kyle said, her voice softer now, motioning to a long, sturdy oak table in the center of the room. Taylor placed the black case down gently, opening it just far enough to reveal the glinting edge of the metal. Kyle didn't move closer. She simply stared, her eyes misting over, a flicker of raw emotion crossing her ancient face. "I never thought I'd see one again," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a profound sense of loss and wonder. Not after Berlin, not after Geneva, not after Mexico City. Each location was a whispered echo of a forgotten battle, a lost mission. Taylor sat down opposite her, compelled by an invisible force. "What is it, really?" she asked, her voice earnest, seeking the truth behind the object that had so profoundly altered her life. Kyle pulled a chair opposite Taylor, her movements slow, deliberate, as if each action carried immense weight. "It's a trigger, a signal, a key to the last phase of Xylon." She looked at the medal, then at Taylor, her gaze sharp, unwavering. "Your grandfather and I, Douglas, we were part of a team that built a framework of global psychological infrastructure. We embedded ideas into culture, language, even religion, not subtly but deeply, systematically. And when the Cold War ended, we buried it all. Every protocol, every sleeper node, all deactivated. Or so we thought. But why?" Taylor pressed, needing to understand the immense, terrifying scope of what Kyle was describing. "Why hide it?" "Because what we built could outlast governments," Kyle said, her voice laced with a chilling pragmatism. "It was too powerful, too tempting. We didn't trust anyone, not even each other. So we broke the key into pieces, 7 medals, each one bound to a specific chain of command, a unique set of activation parameters." Her eyes held a haunted look, a reflection of the unimaginable power they had wielded and then meticulously dismantled. One day, if the balance tipped too far in any direction, of propaganda, corruption, or madness overtook reason, we were supposed to come back together, reactivate the system, restore balance. She looked away, her gaze fixed on the flickering fire, as if seeing ghosts in the flames. But we never agreed on what balance truly meant. What one person saw as order, another might see as tyranny. Taylor leaned forward, her heart pounding. "So why now? Why me?" Because your grandfather was the last one who believed in restraint, Kyle said, her voice gaining a new intensity. And he knew someone was waking Xylon up from the outside, not one of us, someone with a digital arsenal and no moral compass. Someone who found traces of what we left behind and is trying to reactivate the program for control for their version of balance. Taylor's eyes narrowed, a cold ripple spreading through her spine. Someone else is trying to use it. Kyle nodded grimly. Everything you've seen lately, she continued, her voice low and ominous. Social division, cultural collapse, the obsession with narrative, the sudden, unprecedented rise of emotional manipulation across every platform imaginable. That's someone using Xylon's bones to build a new monster. They believe they are saving the world by imposing their own order, their own version of truth, no matter the cost to individual thought or freedom. They see themselves as the ultimate arbiters of sanity, and they are willing to burn everything to achieve it. She stood and retrieved a small, unassuming folder from a hidden compartment in the desk, placing it in front of Taylor. Inside were names, photos, locations, dossiers on world leaders, media executives, algorithm engineers, people tied to ideological warfare on a global scale, a frightening web of influence, meticulously documented. All connected? Taylor asked, her voice barely a whisper, the sheer scale of the network overwhelming. All infected, Kyle corrected, her voice sharp. And the only thing that can stop them is reassembling what we tried to forget, not to fight back with power, but with precision, with truth. Kyle leaned forward, her ancient eyes locking onto Taylor's. The intensity of her gaze was absolute. The question now is, do you want to become part of it? Taylor's throat tightened. The weight of the world, of a secret war she never knew existed, suddenly pressed down on her. I'm 17, and yet here you are, Kyle said, her voice unwavering. You're already in it. The only way out is forward. Outside, the snow began to fall again, thick and silent, blanketing the cabin in a shroud of white. The agents waited in the van, unaware of the conversation taking place behind closed doors, a conversation that would reshape the future of the world. Inside the cabin, a ghost of the Cold War placed her final, desperate hope in a girl who never asked for any of it. And the medal, resting between them, gleamed faintly in the firelight, like it knew the world was about to shift again, irrevocably. The air crackled with a silent tension, a palpable sense of destiny unfolding. The cabin, once a haven of seclusion, had become the epicenter of a new, terrifying yet hopeful beginning. The weight of Xylon's past and its potential future now rested squarely on Taylor's young shoulders. The fire had died down to glowing embers when Serafina Kael finally stood. The last vestiges of the day's sunlight had long since faded, replaced by the soft, ethereal glow from the hearth, casting long dancing shadows across the cabin's ancient timber walls. "You'll sleep here tonight," she said simply, her voice carrying the quiet authority of one accustomed to giving orders, even in the stillness of her secluded sanctuary. Taylor sat at the cabin's long oak table, the folder Kyle had given her still open in front of her. Names, photos, timelines, connections, all meticulously documented, all pointing to a silent, unseen war that had never truly ended. She wasn't ready to close it yet. Her fingers hovered over one name in particular, Victor Mikhail, a former Eastern Bloc information officer, allegedly dead in 1998, now according to Kyle's intelligence, apparently pulling the strings of disinformation networks across 3 continents. His eyes in the grainy photo seemed to hold a cold, calculating intelligence, a mind capable of orchestrating chaos on a global scale. The sheer audacity of his supposed resurrection and his current role sent a shiver down Taylor's spine. "He's not working alone," Kyle said, her voice cutting through Taylor's thoughts, noticing her focus on Mikhail's dossier. Kyle walked to the stone hearth, prodding the embers with a long iron poker, sending sparks dancing into the dark chimney. That's the problem. Xylon's bones were scattered, but not buried deep enough. Someone found them. They're stitching together a new version, leaner, faster, digital. A ghost in the machine, manipulating the very fabric of reality. The implication was chilling, a shadow war, fought not with bullets, but with bites, infecting the global psyche from within. Taylor finally voiced the question that had been haunting her since the moment she left her grandfather's cabin, since the moment the medal had revealed its impossible truth. "Why didn't you stop them earlier?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a raw mix of confusion and frustration. If Kyle knew so much, if this threat was so immense, why had she waited? Kyle stared into the dying embers of the fireplace, as if the glowing coals held a confession, a burden carried for decades. Her posture softened slightly, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. "Because until now, I didn't know which side would come looking first." Her voice was laced with a deep weariness, a knowledge of the labyrinthine complexities of power and loyalty. She spoke of the delicate balance between activating Xylon for its original purpose, to restore balance, and risking its activation by those who sought to weaponize its principles for pure control. The line, she explained, was razor-thin, and the consequences of choosing incorrectly were catastrophic. She had waited, watched, and weighed every possible variable, knowing that an untimely move could doom them all. She walked to a hidden cabinet, its surface blending seamlessly with the log walls. With practiced movements, she pulled out a thick olive-green envelope, sealed with fading ink, the words Xylon Archive, classified Level 0, barely legible on its worn surface. The paper felt heavy, dense with unwritten history. "You're not just here to carry the mail," she said, turning back to Taylor, her eyes sharp once more. "You're here to become something your grandfather was, a crier of convergence. That means you don't act alone. You find the others." "The other 6? Taylor asked, a sense of overwhelming responsibility settling upon her. The idea of reassembling such a scattered, dangerous legacy seemed impossible. Kyle nodded. "Some are dead. Some disappeared into the deepest shadows, becoming legends even to us. One turned against us, corrupted by the very power we sought to contain. But at least 2 are still out there, waiting for a signal, waiting for this." She gestured towards the medal, a silent, powerful beacon. Taylor swallowed hard, the magnitude of her task almost suffocating. "And I'm the signal." "You're what they never expected," Kyle affirmed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "A clean variable, uncompromised. They'll listen to you because of your blood, because of the legacy you carry, and because Douglas trained you, whether you knew it or not." Kyle's words suggested a subconscious tutelage, years of seemingly ordinary lessons now revealing their true hidden purpose. She spoke of Douglas's meticulous nature, his seemingly mundane hobbies, his shortwave radio, his intricate ciphers hidden in poetry, all being subtle preparations for this very moment. He had in essence built her unknowingly into the perfect conduit for Xylon's reactivation. Kyle walked over to a shelf, her gaze sweeping over rows of ancient dust-covered books and forgotten artifacts. She pulled down an old tarnished tin box. Inside, nestled among faded photographs and brittle notes, were 7 small weathered cards. Each was engraved with a single line of code, elegant and complex. Taylor recognized the pattern immediately. She'd seen it before, hidden within the neat, cryptic handwriting in her grandfather's notebook, disguised as lines of poetry, intricate verses that now revealed their true, sinister meaning. Her grandfather had been a master of disguise, embedding layers of hidden information into the mundane. "These are your routes," Kyle said, her voice soft but firm. "Each code corresponds to a geographic location and a frequency. Some are tied to old shortwave stations, buried deep beneath abandoned structures, relics of a past era now serving a new purpose. Others lead to encrypted mesh servers, hidden within the darkest corners of the global digital network. This was our dead man's switch, the ultimate failsafe. And now, it's live." Taylor stared at the box, realization dawning with a chilling clarity. The full, terrifying scope of her grandfather's legacy and Kyle's life's work finally clicked into place. "You want me to reactivate Xylon?" Kyle corrected her gently, her gaze unwavering. "I want you to reassemble the people who can choose whether Xylon should even exist anymore, whether its power should be unleashed upon a world that has forgotten its very name, but is now, ironically, being shaped by its warped echoes." She emphasized that Xylon, in its original form, was a tool, neither good nor evil, but capable of immense destruction or salvation, depending on the wielder. The choice, Kyle implied, was now Taylor's. Outside, the sun rose slowly over the Rockies, spilling gold and pink light over the snow-capped peaks and the towering trees, illuminating the world in a deceptive calm. Taylor stood on the porch of the cabin, wrapped in an old military coat Kyle had given her, its weight both real and symbolic. It felt like a shield, but also a burden, a testament to the heavy task that lay before her. Agent Taylor Vance approached quietly from the van, her face etched with a mix of concern and grudging respect. "She told you everything?" Lyra asked, her voice low. "Enough to be terrified," Taylor said, her gaze fixed on the rising sun, "and just enough to say yes." Her voice was quiet, but firm, imbued with a newfound resolve that surprised even Lyra. Lyra didn't push for more. Instead, she handed Taylor a small, hardened case. "Encrypted transceiver," she said, "military grade, offline capable. You'll use it to reach us when needed, but the rest is up to you. Our hands are tied by protocols that predate even Xylon's official decommissioning. We can support, but we cannot directly intervene in what's to come." Colonel Cassian Hale joined them, nodding toward the winding road. "We'll give you transportation, but once you leave Fountain City, we can't offer formal protection. Xylon's status is still off books. The higher-ups, they don't want to touch this, they don't want it to exist. They don't believe it's real." Taylor asked, a hint of irony in her voice. "Oh, they believe it," Hale said, a grim line forming on his lips. "That's what scares them." His words implied a deeper fear within the establishment, not just of Xylon itself, but of the unpredictable power it represented, a power that defied traditional chains of command and established order. The fear of chaos, of losing control, was palpable. Serafina Kyle stepped outside, joining them on the porch. She handed Taylor a leather-bound notebook. It looked handmade, its paper inside filled with symbols, frequencies, and names written in codes. Codes only Taylor could decipher, because her grandfather had taught her the cipher without ever saying so, embedding the knowledge deep within her through games, riddles, and seemingly random lessons. "This is your map," Kyle said, her voice softer than before, yet carrying immense weight. "It won't be easy. They'll try to follow you, intercept you, confuse you. But they won't see you coming. Not at first." Her eyes held a glimmer of ancient wisdom, a knowing glint of the traps and challenges that awaited Taylor. Lyra glanced at Kyle, a rare question in her eyes. "You really trust her with this?" Kyle's gaze, steady and unwavering, met Lyra's. "She's the only one I trust." The conviction in her voice was absolute, leaving no room for doubt. That afternoon they drove Taylor to a small airstrip in Pueblo, far from prying eyes and cameras. A vintage Cessna sat waiting on the tarmac, its metal gleaming in the afternoon sun. It had been retrofitted with a modern guidance system, yet held no official registry, a phantom plane for a phantom mission. A woman stepped out of the cockpit, tall and self-assured. Juno Blackwood, a civilian pilot with her own mysterious history, a past hinted at through her knowing smile and the subtle lines around her eyes. "I was told this one's special," Juno said, grinning as she tossed Taylor a pair of noise-cancelling headphones. "You ready for the ride?" Taylor climbed aboard. The black case holding the medal sat securely in her lap, a constant, tangible reminder of her burden. Around her neck hung the original shortwave frequency tag from her grandfather's desk, repurposed as a pendant, a personal talisman. As the plane rose into the air, Colorado falling away beneath her, Taylor opened the leather-bound notebook. The first coordinate was written in her grandfather's familiar handwriting. It led to a small town outside Hamburg, Germany, a frequency station buried beneath an abandoned power plant. The words on the page seemed to hum with a quiet energy, guiding her to the next step of her unforeseen journey. Juno looked over at her mid-flight, her voice cutting through the drone of the engine. "So, what's your mission?" Taylor looked out the window, her voice quiet but certain, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon. "I'm supposed to find ghosts and ask them if they still believe in the truth." Back at the cabin, Serafina Kyle watched the contrail vanish into the blue sky, a faint white line dissolving into the vastness. She returned inside and reached into the fire's dying embers with a pair of iron tongs. Pulling out a half-melted object, she revealed her own medal, warped and fused, bearing the same eagle and lightning bolts but scarred by heat and time. She placed it in a steel box, locked it and sealed it with wax. Then she walked to the old shortwave radio. With practiced hands, she adjusted the dial to a long-forgotten channel, a frequency dormant for decades. She tapped in a pattern on the Morse key, ... G-O-5-P-A-C-K, hello. Seconds later, a faint but clear response returned, ... /... She is listening. Kyle smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of her lips, the first genuine smile in years. So it had begun. Again. "Okay, here is part 6 of the script, aiming for a minimum of 2,200 words, meticulously following the established outline and incorporating all enhancements, with no external descriptions or notes." Part 6. The abandoned power plant outside Hamburg stood like a relic of a forgotten empire. Its rusted skeleton of steel beams tangled in vines, glass panes shattered, and warning signs barely legible in the muted morning light screamed decay and disuse. It was a monument to a past era, now a silent, imposing sentinel over secrets buried deep within its foundations. Taylor stood at the edge of the perimeter fence, the biting wind whipping at her cheeks, the leather-bound notebook clutched tightly in one gloved hand. She double-checked the coordinates, verifying them against her grandfather's cryptic notes. This was the place. From his meticulous records, she knew it had once powered a Cold War-era listening station, a clandestine outpost used by NATO for signal interception, its purpose veiled in layers of classified operations. But deep beneath the obvious ruins of the plant, past the decaying machinery and collapsing walls, was something less official. Node 3, as the notebook called it, one of the Xylon Network's 7 dormant receivers, designed to reactivate only if the medal was ever scanned at close range. And now she was here. Juno had dropped her a few kilometers away under cover of the pre-dawn darkness, the small Cessna a silent phantom against the faint stars. No one was supposed to know she was in Germany, not yet. But Taylor had already accepted a hard truth. Someone, somewhere, was always watching. The very existence of Xylon implied an eternal game of shadows. She slipped through a torn section of the fence, the rusty wires scraping softly against her coat, and moved quickly across the cracked asphalt, her footsteps echoing faintly in the vast, empty space. Birds scattered from the rafters above, their frantic chirps the only sound breaking the silence as her boots crunched over debris, past a sagging wall of rusted lockers, and down a stairwell swallowed by shadows, leading into the cold, silent earth. She found the hatch buried beneath a pile of fallen sheet metal, its surface grimy and forgotten. A fingerprint scanner blinked a dull, unwavering red, a defiant spark of technology in the abandoned darkness. Taylor pulled out the metal, its smooth, cool surface a stark contrast to the grime around her. She held it up to the plate. The light flickered, then turned green with a soft electronic hum. With a low hiss of releasing pressure, the heavy hatch unlocked. She descended into darkness, the stale, cold air wrapping around her. Inside, the air was colder than above, but remarkably dry, perfectly preserved, as if time itself had been held in stasis. Her flashlight beam cut through thick dust motes dancing in the air, illuminating ancient cobwebs and the outlines of forgotten equipment. She stepped into a narrow concrete hallway, the silence profound, almost suffocating. At the end, a steel door awaited, reinforced with bolted rods and bearing Xylon's eagle and lightning insignia, faintly visible under layers of grime, a ghostly reminder of its true purpose. She took a deep, steadying breath and pushed. The room lit automatically, humming to life with a low, resonant thrum for the first time in decades. A circular chamber greeted her, filled with old military consoles, rows of shortwave receivers, and a central pedestal with a slot perfectly shaped for the medal's base. Above it, a black monitor flickered to life, displaying a single stark prompt: "Initiate legacy." Taylor stared at it. She thought about her grandfather, Darian, his quiet strength, his hidden life. She thought about Serafina Kael, the weight of her ancient wisdom, her desperate hope. She thought about the names in the leather-bound notebook, the vast, unseen network of influence she was now tasked with navigating. Her hand trembled as she typed a single, questioning word onto the console: "Why?" The monitor went black. Then it began. A cascade of data flowed across the screen, a mesmerizing torrent of decrypted call logs, embedded algorithms, geosignals, and name after name from Xylon's ghost registry. The system hadn't just been dormant. It had been listening, waiting. It displayed alerts from as recently as last month. Someone had been trying to simulate Xylon's command signals without the medal. A digital impersonator, a shadow trying to wear the skin of a titan. Taylor swallowed hard. Someone out there had nearly fooled the system into waking. Whoever they weren't far behind her. The cold efficiency of the network was terrifying, hinting at an intelligence and persistence that rivaled Xylon itself. Then the system printed something unexpected. A single name, blinking in vibrant green: Agent Marcus Thorne, active Node 2, Oslo. Taylor blinked. She remembered the name, one of the original 7. Her grandfather had underlined it 3 times in the notebook and written one chilling word beside it: diverged. She tapped the screen. A file opened. Blurry photos, encrypted memos, and a grainy image of Marcus Thorne walking through an airport terminal just 2 weeks earlier. The photo was time-stamped from Oslo, Norway. He was alive, but the last note in the file chilled her to the bone. Affiliated with Nexus. Status: compromised. She didn't know what Nexus was yet beyond Kyle's brief, ominous description, but she knew what compromised meant. Thorne had either sold out, been reprogrammed, or decided to rebuild Xylon in his own distorted image. She had to get to him before he got to her. The thought of confronting one of her grandfather's former comrades, now potentially an adversary, filled her with a profound sense of foreboding. Across the world, inside a gleaming glass tower in Zurich, a tall man in a slate-grey suit stood before a vast digital wall, watching the very same access signal Taylor had just triggered in Hamburg. The green flash on his screen denoting Node 3's activation was a confirmation of a long-held prophecy. He sipped black tea slowly, his expression utterly unreadable, a picture of serene control. "She found Node 3, his assistant said, tapping a control panel nearby, his voice laced with a mix of surprise and apprehension. "We're sure it's the girl?" the man replied, his voice calm, almost detached, yet resonating with an undercurrent of deep satisfaction. The Xylon key confirmed it. "Douglas Vance's legacy has finally come online. What should we do?" the assistant asked, awaiting instruction. The man walked to a polished cabinet, opened it, and removed a case identical to Taylor's, sleek, black leather with brass trim, but his medal bore a different symbol, a serpent coiled around a torch. "Nexus," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the symbol of his own power. "We continue the game, deploy the signal interceptors, scramble Node 4, and activate Marcus Thorne." His voice hardened, a steely resolve underlying his measured tone. The chess pieces were moving, and Taylor Vance had just made her first, unwitting move. Back in the Hamburg facility, Taylor copied as much data as she could onto a secure drive Serafina Kyle had given her. She knew the longer she stayed, the more vulnerable she became. Every second she lingered was a second for Nexus to narrow their search, to identify her, to send their own agents. As she turned to leave, the console buzzed one final time, a soft, insistent hum. A message scrolled across the screen, a parting whisper from the resurrected network. "You are not alone." Her breath caught. A small gasp of surprise. Then, beneath it, in smaller text, a new directive, clear and urgent, Node 5, Athens. Awaiting contact. Another one was alive. She wasn't the only thread in this forgotten tapestry, a sliver of hope mixed with the rising urgency. She grabbed the drive, tucked it securely, and ran. Juno met her at the extraction point just after midnight, the small Cessna a welcome silhouette against the pale pre-dawn sky. She had changed the registration plates on their rental car twice, a testament to the cat-and-mouse game they were already engaged in. They drove in silence for several miles, the only sound the soft hum of the engine and the crunch of tires on the deserted road, before Taylor finally spoke. "I'm being followed." "I figured," Juno said, her gaze fixed on the road, betraying no surprise. She tossed a burner phone into Taylor's lap. "They pinged your signal twice before I scrambled the uplink. You've got maybe a day's lead, 2 at max. They know about Thorne, which means he already knows about you." Juno's words were clipped, professional, a stark reminder of the escalating danger. Taylor looked out the window, the passing darkness reflecting the turmoil in her mind. "He's in Oslo." Juno whistled softly, a low, impressed sound. "That's bold!" Taylor held up the medal, its presence a cool, solid weight in her hand. "I need to know if he remembers who he used to be. If there's still a part of him that believes in the mission." Her voice was quiet, steady, imbued with a deep, unsettling resolve. The choice before her was stark: confront a potential enemy or find a lost ally. "And if there's not?" Juno asked, her voice equally quiet. Understanding the unspoken stakes, Taylor's gaze hardened, meeting Juno's. "Then I find the next one." Her words carried the weight of a young woman accepting a burden far beyond her years, a responsibility she hadn't asked for but would not shy away from. Outside, snow began to fall again, dancing in the headlights, a silent, swirling curtain against the European night. Somewhere in Europe, a former Xylon operative had either turned traitor or been tragically compromised, and a 17-year-old girl, holding a relic of a forgotten war, was the only one willing to find out whether redemption or destruction lay on the other side. The path ahead was treacherous, shrouded in deceit and ancient loyalties, but Taylor Vance had just taken her first decisive step into the heart of the Shadow War. Chắc chắn rồi. Dưới đây là đoạn outro dài khoảng 700 từ, được viết theo yêu cầu của bạn, nhấn mạnh ý nghĩa của câu chuyện và kêu gọi tương tác từ khán giả. The Oslo wind whipped around her, a biting reminder of the storm she had just weathered and the greater tempest that still lay ahead. Taylor Vance stood on the edge of the fjord, the digital device in her hand, a fragile key to a crumbling world. Juno Blackwood's Cessna, a phantom against the breaking dawn, hovered just above the makeshift landing pad, its engines a roar that swallowed her thoughts. She had gotten more than just the data. She had found a sliver of truth in a landscape of lies, a glimpse into the heart of a conflict that transcended governments and generations. The medal, cool and solid against her palm, hummed faintly, a pulse from the buried past, now shockingly alive. As the plane ascended, leaving the city lights behind, Taylor opened her grandfather Darian's notebook one last time. On the final page, a line she hadn't noticed before seemed to glow faintly, etched with the wisdom of a man who had lived in shadows. In the dark, truth isn't found, it's protected. The words resonated deep within her, a new understanding settling in her heart. She didn't know what would come next. Who would come for her? How far the insidious reach of Nexus extended? How many layers of deceit she would have to peel back? But she knew this, the silence had been broken. The impossible had become real, and the girl they had underestimated, the quiet inheritor of a forgotten war, was now the last firewall between truth and oblivion. Xylon had returned, not as the weapon it once was, but as a fractured echo, seeking reunification through her hands. The choice of its purpose, its very existence, now rested on her young shoulders. Would she succumb to the cynicism of a world that had abandoned its ideals, or would she become the beacon that ignited a new fight for what was real? Her journey was just beginning. A winding path into the heart of a global deception, where every shadow held a secret and every whisper carried a lie. The stakes had never been higher, and the battle for the mind of humanity had truly begun. This is the kind of story that reminds us how deeply interwoven our world is, with hidden forces, with legacies that refuse to stay buried. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other truths might lie just beneath the surface of our everyday lives, waiting for the right moment or the right person to bring them to light? Perhaps there are other medals, other signals, other forgotten guardians whose quiet vigilance shapes the unseen currents of our history. We hope you've been as captivated by Taylor Vance's unexpected journey as we have. This narrative, a blend of historical whispers and a thrilling modern-day quest, serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not on battlefields, but in the quiet corners of the mind, in the subtle manipulations of information. It's a testament to the enduring power of truth and the courage it takes to protect it against overwhelming odds. Here at Veteran Biker, we are passionate about bringing you stories that ignite your imagination, challenge your perceptions, and perhaps even inspire you to look a little closer at the world around you. We believe that behind every headline, every seemingly ordinary event, there might be a deeper, more profound story waiting to be told. If Taylor's story resonated with you, if it sparked that sense of wonder and curiosity, then we invite you to become a part of our community. Your support allows us to continue delving into these fascinating narratives, to uncover the hidden gems and share them with you. Thank you for watching and for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to Veteran Biker for more captivating stories. Your engagement truly makes a difference. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Taylor's mission. What do you think she should do next? Who do you believe are the remaining Xylon operatives she needs to find? And how do you think she should confront the might of Nexus? Share your theories and insights in the comments section below. Your perspectives enrich our community and fuel our discussions. And for more thrilling adventures and intriguing tales, make sure to check out our other videos appearing on your screen right now. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep exploring the stories that shape our world.